Hello and welcome to the Facebook Live today. This has been a kind of a crazy week. It's got hijacked by myself, and I'll explain that in a few seconds. But it's Friday, so happy Friday. Welcome to you Facebook viewers and you YouTube viewers, and welcome to you replay viewers if you're catching this at a later time. Again, my name's Henry Byer with Strong for Life, and this is my Friday YouTube Live. So thanks for being here. Now, all right, I don't understand. I've raised my computer and I'm trying, and I know I'm supposed to look at the green dot. If I look ahead, it looks like I'm looking, I think someone has to fill me in if my eyes are looking down or not. The green dot is up here, and I think it makes me look like I'm looking straight ahead if I just look right at the screen this way. I don't know. You have to let me know, because looking up at the green dot feels weird. But maybe I'll try it, and then I'll just look at the recording. Anyways, that's my technical issue. But so we have our quote of the day today, and we'll get to that in a second. And then we are going to go through sort of like a sample workout. Now, I didn't have as much time to put this one together as I would have liked to give you more detail, but we'll just give you a sample plan of what we're talking about for a workout. And February has been planning month. This is the last episode we're going to have in February, because I usually do them Tuesday through Friday, and next Tuesday is in March. So we might have to wrap up. If there's any couple things to wrap up, we might have to cover a couple things next week on planning. I'll just see how today goes and if I want to do that or not. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about a sample plan, and it's going to be a little bit off. It's going to be mostly off the top of my head. I did jot down some notes, but the reason why my week got hijacked is, as I said, because of me. And it's sort of a funny story. I went to pick up my son from Boulder. We live outside of Boulder, like 25 minutes outside of Boulder. I went to pick up my son on Tuesday afternoon. So Tuesday, I did a Facebook Live, and I was like, okay, this week's going to be blah, blah, blah about this, right? And I went to pick him up, and on our way home, we have a VW van, a 1990 VW Vanagon camper van, like a Westie, Westfalia. And so I was going up the hill. I was still in Boulder. I wasn't, because we live up a very windy road, and was fortunately still in Boulder when this happened. So I was leaving Boulder, going up a little hill, and the van just died, powered gonzo. And I managed to roll it back down the hill into a nice parking space. It actually worked out. There was a perfect parking space right at the end of a block, so where they have the stop signs that say no parking here, and then and then maybe another street comes in. So I was able to get right into that spot. It was perfect. So that was a good thing. And so then we had to wait a couple hours for my wife to finish work so that we could all drive home together. Next morning, I drove down into Boulder and called AAA, had them come and tow the truck and take it to the mechanic. And I had to wait for 2 hours for AAA. And oddly enough, our other truck, which is a 1998, another vehicle that we have, which is a 1998 Toyota Tacoma pickup with almost 300,000 miles on it, I had to have it towed today because we think that the fuel pump is bad. And on Tuesday or Wednesday, I had to wait 2 hours. And today, I think I waited 3 hours for a tow truck to show up. Now, at our house here, it's a little bit more understandable that it would take longer, but still, I don't know. Every time I've had to get a tow, it seems like it just takes 2 hours or something like that for the tow truck to arrive. I don't understand why that's the case. It does not seem, Maybe there's just not that much tow truck drive, not many tow truck drivers. Maybe that's a business to get into, is tow truck driving. I don't know. Anyway, so I waited 2 hours. The tow truck got taken to the mechanic. Later that day, the mechanic called me and he's like, well, I looked over your van and it looks like you ran out of gas. So, can you, like, I spent all that time, inconvenienced my son, inconvenienced my wife a little bit, all because I ran out of gas. And because of that, it screwed up both my days. And it just didn't work to do one of these live broadcasts on those days because of, because on Thursday, I had to go back down to Boulder. That was yesterday. I had to go back down to Boulder to pick up the van. So my wife and I drove down together and we timed it because she had to take her mom to go get her vaccine shot. And, and then I had a call. As soon as I got home, I had a call. I did the whole timing thing. Everything just blew up. So now, in my defense on running out of gas, because like, what an idiot, you ran out of gas. And I agree. Running out of gas is, it happens, but it's just embarrassing, right? So the fuel gauge doesn't work. Sometime last year, the fuel gauge started to go out. And when we drive it, like on a trip, you can you're like, when you fill it up and then you drive for a little while and you fill it up again, and it just seems to work out. But at home, and this partly because I think my wife's truck, because like a week or two ago, we figured out the fuel pump was bad. And then we were debating on what we were going to do. And the mechanic that we take it to didn't have space for it. So we had to wait a little bit for it to be able to get towed, the truck to get towed over there. So I was using the van more, and I do write down every time in my phone, I jot down every time that I fill it with gas, but the last time I did it was February 5th, and driven twice a week, which I probably had, I would have been close to running out of gas. And so when I filled it, I picked it up yesterday. When the mechanic said that he put 5 gallons of gas in it. And when I picked it up and I took it to the gas station and I filled it up, I put 15 gallons of gas in it. So it has like an 18-gallon tank with maybe like a 2-gallon reserve in it. So anyway, that was my saga of the week of having to call AAA twice, spent 5 hours waiting for tows, and my week was hijacked. So let's get to the quote of the day today. Again, welcome, viewers. Nice to have you here. We're going to do the quote of the day. Here, this one comes from Georgie Bear, and he begins to die that quits his desires. And oh, look, I have a double. We got too many quotes and quotation marks in here. Have to fix that. So Georgie Bear was, he was a physical, I think they called them the physical culturists. This was in the early 1900s, and he sort of created not the modern gymnasium, but he had this experience where he was an officer officer in the French army. Maybe it was the French Navy, because this happened on the water. But either way, he was on a boat that capsized, and this was a civilian boat. Oh, so a civilian boat capsized, and I think he was in the Navy and an officer, and they went to rescue people. And he noticed people could not save themselves. They were not strong enough to save themselves, and people were drowning in the Mediterranean. And this totally freaked him out. So he went on to start sort of a physical culture in France, and it was all about. It's really about body weight stuff and gymnastics and calisthenics and whatnot. But he really believed that to be to be useful as a person, you had to be physically fit. You had to be physically useful, strong enough to be useful. And so he had a whole philosophy around fitness and training that he what's the word? I don't know what the word. There's a word that was on the tip of my tongue, but I don't know what it was. But that he basically lived by this particular physical philosophy in which, being strong and agile, being able to like run and swim and jump and climb trees and things like that are were the things that he believed that were important. And if you've heard of Nat movement or Nat move, that's the shortened version of natural movement put out by this guy, Erwan LaCour. And you should check him out. Look up Nat move. And it's all about moving naturally in your environment, lifting logs, lifting rocks, balance, rolling, jumping, climbing, all sorts of things like that. And it sort of grew out of this guy named Georgie Bear. Anyways, so he begins to die that quits his desires. So I get that, right? It's if there's something that you really are into and you don't get to do it, it's soul sucking, right? It just like tears you apart. So whatever it is that you're into, make it a priority and do that thing. And for me, getting out, we're going this weekend to Taos to ski. And so being able to get out and go skiing with my wife and my son, that's huge for me. Mountain biking too. So the time that I have during the week to train is important because it helps me be able to do those things that I like to do on the weekends with my family. Because as much as anybody else, I am definitely a weekend warrior. And, that's, Strong for Life is really focused at folks who, have limited time to get out and do the things that they want to do, and provide sort of a training idea to help them be able to do the things they love to do, whether it's skiing, playing golf, playing tennis, paddle boarding, mountain biking, road biking, whatever it is, but having a training plan that helps you do that activity to the best you can when you have the chance to do it. So with that in mind, let's talk about, I'm going to hide this quote here. Let's talk about a couple of sample plans for someone who, I have two different people. They're basically the same person, but we're going to say there's two different, they're coming to the training in two different ways. So let's just say you're 50 years old or something like that. You're in your 40s and your 50s. You have a goal. Maybe you want to lose a little bit of weight, but you also want to get more defined. You want to get some muscle definition, right? You don't have any restrictions in your physical abilities. There's nothing stopping you from taking on a training plan. But you're kind of stiff and you have normal stuff, lower back pain, achy joints, things like that. You have had some experience training before, but you haven't been doing it for a little while. You might enjoy tennis, or maybe it's golf, some hiking, you like biking and skiing, just typical kinds of activities. You also have, I'm going to just say you have 5 days a week that you can get out and do a little bit of training. This is like 30 to 45 minutes each weekday that you have set aside to do some training. You've committed to do that. So what would a good training plan look like for someone like that, right? And so even though there's two sort of categories here, there's one person who hasn't been training for like 6 to 12 months or more than that, and someone that's maybe in the 2 to 4 months that they haven't been training, right? So there's different ways that you want to approach this if that's the case. So let's talk about, first, let's just talk about what a week schedule would look like if you're going to train 5 days a week. So 3 of those days should be some type of cardio work. And it doesn't have to be long, but it should be some type of cardio. And then 2 days, would be resistance training, especially starting out. And then, so with that framework, let's talk about the person who hasn't been training. It's been like 6 to 12 months or longer. They've trained in the past, but for whatever reason, they haven't been training in the last year or so. And that person is basically close to a person that hasn't done any training, except for the fact that they have some experience under their belt with exercises and things along those lines. But the way to approach this person would be the same as approaching someone who's brand new. They've never done any physical training exercise in their life, and they want to start a program. So let's talk about cardio first. So the cardio, you would want to start with something very simple, just walking. And I got this plan from this guy named Barry Ross. And he was, I don't know if he is anymore, but he at least was a track coach for female high school athletes. I think it was in Washington somewhere. And what he would do at the beginning of the track season is he would have his athletes, he would have them do this 3 days a week. They would walk for 15 minutes, 3 days a week for 4 weeks. And each time they walked, they would walk for 7.5 minutes. Imagine that you just had a straight road that you could walk on, a straight flat road that you could walk on. You'd walk for 7.5 minutes out and then 7.5 minutes back. And each time you went out, you'd have to walk a little bit further than you did the time before. And you'd have to make it back to the start in the same 7.5 minutes at the second half of the 15 minutes. So each day you're walking a little bit further and then coming back. And he found that after 4 weeks of his athletes doing that they were then fit enough to start training. So for a detrained or untrained person, this is what your cardio should be. It should be walking. So what you're doing is you're not only building up your cardio respiratory ability, but you're also conditioning your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, your joints for the impact of higher, or of more intense exercise. So walking is fairly low impact, but if you haven't been doing it, it's going to take your body a little while to adjust. And you do that 3 days a week. And I did this in the fall. We live kind of in a weird place that doesn't, but we live on about 4 acres. So I have this 1/4 mile track in my yard. And so I would walk that. And after about 4 weeks, I was able to do a mile in 15 minutes. And then I just started running after that. So if you're looking to start a program, this is a great way to start. Just do this walking. If you live in the city and you have a block, walk 15 minutes around the block one way and then 7.5 minutes around the block one way and then 7.5 minutes around the block the other way. And as long as you're getting back to the start distance and you're adding distance each time, you are improving your conditioning. So that is really what the cardio would be for somebody just starting out. And I have them do that for 4 weeks, maybe even 6 weeks, just to get the body ready. It would just depend on how they were doing. That would be a little bit of a play it by ear sort of thing. 4 to 6 weeks of that would be awesome. Just walking faster, covering more distance in the same amount of time. That way, you know exactly how long you're going out for. You're going out for 15 minutes of cardio. We can all squeeze in 15 minutes of cardio early on. And then as you start feeling better and more conditioned, then you can push to go a little longer. And I'll talk about how to increase your cardio for when you start to run or jog, or maybe it's bike. You could do this on a stationary bike if you wanted to, but I think on a road bike, unless you were on a track, the road, but you wouldn't get the same effect. There'd be too much. I think there'd be too much variability. You want to do this walking. Plus, with the walking, you get the impact, and you really are working on those joints and those ligaments and the muscle and all this sort of stuff that comes along with doing something like walking and running. And then you could move to a bike after that. So that's sort of what the cardio would look at. Then I would say, to begin with, you would do 2 days of strength training, of resistance training, and for the same amount of time, 4 to 6 weeks. And this is for someone, again, who hasn't been doing anything, who's never done anything, or hasn't been doing anything for, from 6 months to a year or longer, right? They're what is called detrained, because maybe they were once fit, but now they're not. So this person, you were going, hold on one second. I didn't like the light on my face. I think that's a little better. So 2 days a week of resistance training. This would be the next thing that we're going to talk about. So the first thing to know is that you, just like with walking, you want to condition your ligaments and tendons and your joints and connective tissue. That's like the first goal. This guy named Bompar, Bompar, he has a great book, and in there he calls it anatomical adaptation. So you're basically you're just getting your body ready to do more work. And so the way you do that is you do sets of higher reps of lower weight. So you want to use you want to be working up to like 30 reps. And you could do these. I was doing this in sets of 8, 10, and 12. That was how I was doing it. I was doing, squats and push-ups and not pull-ups, because for me, that's too much, but I could use like a lighter weight. I could do something lighter in the pulling realm, but just doing a few general movement exercises, push-ups, squats, things like that. And I would do them for those number of reps, 8, 10, 12. That actually gets you to 30. And, if you did that for 4 to 6 weeks, you would really condition your connective tissue really well. And then they would be ready to lift heavier weight. And, one of the reasons that you do that is because your muscles get stronger faster than your tendons and your ligaments and your connective tissue does, and your joints do, because they get more blood flow than those other tissues. There's limited blood flow to those other tissues. So it takes longer for them to grow and adapt. So you would want to spend 4 to 6 weeks just doing like low impact, higher rep sets of, again, things like squats, push-ups. You could do, well, I'm not going to say kettlebell swings, because that takes, some training, and you want to do it you want the reps not to be super hard. You want them to be like, if you're doing 12 reps, you want to be able to have it so that you could at least do 2 or 3 more reps after you're done. You don't want these to be killer sets, like you're dying at the end of those 12 reps. So if you're having difficulty, you can do things like raise your hands. You can even push up from your knees. So I like raising my hands higher first. So find something that's high, like a table or a bench or a chair that you can put your hands on. But the goal is just to do a variety of exercises. This is the thing, a variety of exercises that you can do for a higher number of reps. And you want to hit like your hingings. So something that's sort of like a deadlift, you're squatting, you're push-upping, some type of pulling. I was doing barbell rows, and I was just lightweight, just like that, for that. And then after you are done with that, then you would go into a more structured program. And the lifts that I wrote down that I think would be good are, you would 2 days a week. On day one, you would do some deadlifting of some kind, overhead pressing of some kind. These could be with dumbbells, they could be with barbells, they could be with kettlebells, and some type of ab exercise. And then hold on, let me get my piece of paper over here. Then on the second day of the week, you do like a pull-up or rowing type of action, and a dumbbell bench press. And then a loaded carry. And in that way, like, I haven't talked about the warm up yet, because you might be wondering why there's no squat in there. So the deadlift gets your hinge. The overhead press is a pressing action. You get some ab work. Pull up is a pulling action. So is the row, and the dumbbell bench press is another pressing action, and then the loaded carry. Here you are getting the major movement patterns. I would throw in, I'll talk about the cardio portion again here, as now that we're into a sort of a more structured program after you've sort of gotten yourself prepared to do more work. Because one of those days could be an ab day on one of those cardio days. So those would be your 2 days of deadlift and overhead press on one day, with, you could throw in an ab exercise in there, something like a plank or some type of, not sit up, but curl up. Lately I've been working on L sits. And so they're like where you elevate yourself on your hands and you're trying to lift your legs up, and you get this really strong abdominal contraction. But there's a lot of, the ab wheel would be another one. And then on the second day, you're going to do pull-ups or some sort of rowing action, a dumbbell bench press, and a loaded carry. And again, this is for someone who just completed 4 to 6 weeks of sort of like easy conditioning work to get their body ready to go. And then they are starting to lift more weight. And in terms of sets and reps, I didn't print that thing out, but you would again, at this point, well, there's a couple of options. You could stay at higher reps right now. 8, you would start at like 8 to 10 reps, and then you could drop down in reps and go a little bit higher weight. There's different ways to control the reps there. And then after you did that for a little while, you might go to a more just pure strength thing where you're doing sets of 5. Now, Mark Ripito in Starting Strength, goes to 3 sets of 5. So exactly what the rep count is going to be is going to be a little bit dictated by the goals of the individual. The 6 to 10 reps, again, will give you more hypertrophy. That's in the hypertrophy range, and up to 6 is in the strength range. So that could be, for a new athlete who's looking to get some tone and definition, doing a little bit more reps might be the thing. But depending on the athlete, like if you're a tennis player, you might not want to put on too much muscle. You want strength, but not too much muscle. And so going at heavier weight will help with strength, but not add a lot of muscle. And even though you're not adding muscle, that the strength that you're putting into those muscles will help with tone and definition. And I can talk about tone and definition in just a second and just clear up exactly what we're talking about there as well. Because there is a common misconception about that. And we'll get to that. Okay. So that's the individual who, again, has not done any train. They're basically hasn't let me just start over again. That's the individual who hasn't done any training for, the past 6 year or more, or they've never done any training in your life. They would start with 4 to 6 weeks of just walking, and then they would move into a different cardio plan. That would be 3 days a week, and they have 2 days a week of just doing easy, low intensity, higher rep, multiple exercise type of workouts twice a week. And you might have 3 or 4 exercises on one day that you're going to do, and you might do just 2 or 3 sets of that. And then on the other day, you have another 4 exercises that you're going to do. And you're just trying to get your body as conditioned as possible. And then after that, you would start a more structured strength training, hypertrophy type program that would include some specific lifts. And I put in just basically 4 lifts that would be working on. I like to go kind of more on the minimal side when I'm doing the actual lifting portion of it. Could throw in some assistance exercises if you wanted to, but that again is like a personal choice, and would be up to sort of what your goals are. So after the 4 to 6 weeks of cardio of just walking, you would then transition into a type of, let's say you were going to run, you would start integrating running into your plan. And you might integrate it like only 1 run a week, though you wouldn't necessarily have to. Again, personal preference there. But the 3 days of running would first look like there would be 2 intensity zones that you do to begin with. That's the way I would do it. So Dr. Phil Maffetone has his optimal aerobic heart rate zone, which is your 180 minus your age minus 10. That's the general one. It gets more specific, but I'm not going to go into details here. But basically, in general, you are going to be like, I'm 52, so 180 minus 52 is 128. My optimal aerobic zone is 118 to 128. There are some asterisks here. So if you're interested in the asterisks, like if you're taking medication, if you're a very experienced athlete, if you've had an injury or whatever, then there's some asterisks in terms of how you lower or increase the reps or the heart rate from that zone. But that's the one zone. So some of your training would be in that zone. And then there's a zone below that, which is sort of a more, what this other guy named Stu Middleman calls the more aerobic pace, or the most aerobic pace. So for me, that's from 118 to 98. And so 2 days, I would just alternate these 3 days a week. I would just alternate these. One day I'd do a optimal aerobic heart rate zone, and then the next day I would do a lower aerobic heart rate zone. And so 3 days a week, I would just rotate my cardio like that. And I might do that for another 2, 3, 4 weeks. And then after that, I would introduce 1 day of interval training in there. And that interval training is something called burst cardio. The one that I like to use is this burst cardio. You use your heart rate to gauge when to stop and start the interval. So, and it also gauges the rest period. So for me, the rest period ends when my heart rate gets to 120, and then I start going hard until my heart rate gets to about 155 to 163. And as soon as it gets there, I go easy again. I walk or whatever it is that I'm doing until my heart rate comes down to 120. And so you just would cycle through that for a number of period of times, but that would get included into your cardio sessions. So you'd have 3 cardio sessions a week, basically 1 burst cardio, 1 cardio session where you're in this sort of you're below your optimal heart rate zone, and then 1 where you're in your optimal heart rate zone. And that would be 3 days a week. A very simple plan. And a nice way to do this is, let's just say you're doing you're just going to say, okay, 60 minutes a week, right, is going to be what you're going to do. So you would break out your times between those 3 days. And ideally, you wouldn't do it 20, 20, 20. You would do something like 20. You might do something like 15, 25. That's what is that? 15 and 25 is 40. Maybe more like 15, 27, and 23 or something like that. That might get you to close to 60. I don't know. I'm doing the math in the top of my head. And then the next week, you would raise it to 60. You'd add 10% the next week. So it would go to 66, and then it would go to like 72. And then you would have a deload week. So you do your running in these 4-week chunks where you have 3 weeks of increasing volume, and then you have a deload week, and then you start over again. And over time, you just increase the volume. And this would be the same for the person who has they've had a regular training plan, but for whatever reason, they haven't been training for like the last 2 to 4 months. So let's talk about that person. So the person who hasn't been training for like the last 2 to 4 months, you wouldn't have to start with such a long period of time, 4 to 6 weeks. You might actually, just to be on the safe side, you might just say, okay, I'm just going to go for that 4-week walking period, but you might do it for 3 weeks. You might just do it a little bit less, right? And then you would probably also have a shorter period of time. Well, that would also be the same time when you're doing the cardio. You would do, instead of doing 4 to 6 weeks of walking, you would do like 3 to 4 weeks of walking. And you would do the same thing with your resistance training. Again, you would do low intensity, higher reps, multiple types of exercises that will just help condition your ligaments and your joints and the connective tissue, right? You're just working on getting that stuff strong. So once you start lifting weights, they're not going to get injured. And so essentially the difference between the two is that the individual who hasn't trained at all for a long time is just going to do that for longer than the person who might just be a few months out from not having done anything. Then the workout period would essentially be the same, though you may go straight to more strength training numbers. But again, that depends on your goals. So if your goals are about adding more muscle, then you would use more hypertrophy rep range for your sets. And if it was for strength, you would use a more strength range for your sets. If muscular endurance is important, then you could include that in, and you could either do it on the same day or you could do it on a separate day. If like you were going to do some muscular endurance, it's important to do just some regular strength training, but then you can throw on some muscular endurance on top of that. And all you would do is you would do your muscular endurance after you did the strength training portion of your program. So if you were going to separate them during the week, on your first day of the week, you might do your strength training lifts. And then on the second day of the week, you would do your strength endurance lifting. And you would use those 2 different rep ranges. Remember, muscular endurance is over 12 and greater number of reps, and strength is up to 6. So first thing in the week, you do your strength training, you do your deadlifts and some overhead presses, and maybe you would do some pull-ups or something like that, or some rows. And then then on the next day, you might do similar exercises, but you would do higher reps for that one. The one thing that I forgot to mention is, and it's okay, we can talk about it now, but when we didn't talk about warm up and cool down. So in your warm up, you do something to elevate your heart rate, get your body temperature warmer, and then you would do some dynamic stretching. And there's a lot of different types of dynamic stretching to do, and kind of would tend to focus on the things that need some work. For most of us, that's like tight hamstrings and tight shoulders. So we're doing some things along those lines. And that if you, the one that I'm doing is working on a handstand. So then you would put in some skill work there. And I wrote down something here. What is, exercises for lower back pain. These could go here as well. So you would, because it's a little bit of a skill thing. It's not super strenuous, but it's there to sort of help those muscles get loose and more mobile and things like that. So, but for me, as I was saying, I'm doing a handstand. So after my warm up, I would go to skill work. Skill work is stuff that requires, more attention. You want your nervous system to be fresh, and it is, in a lot of cases, it's not going to be super taxing. So if there's like a new lift you're trying to learn how to do, you might do some low weights with that lift. One of the things that I'm doing is working on learning the Olympic lift. So I've been working on the snatch. I can power clean, and I can actually do a squat clean too, but I am not able to do a squat. I can do a power snatch, but not a squat snatch. So the difference is between a power clean and a power snatch and a squat clean and a squat snatch is that with the power clean, you're trying to get the bar as high as possible. With the power clean, you're trying to get it all the way up to your chest, right? So like you're catching it almost in a standing position. And with the power snatch, again, you're getting it all the way overhead and catching it in basically a standing position. Whereas with the squat clean and the squat snatch, you're cleaning the weight and you're receiving the weight in the squat position. So I was talking about skills. So skills that I'm learning is for me working the skill of snatching to a squat snatch. And I'm a long way away from that. I mean, I can do it with, I shouldn't even say that I can do it with just a PVC pipe. I don't know if I can get into the deep squat out of this, a deep squat snatch, even with a PVC pipe. So my point being that that's a skill that I'm working on. So I would do that before I headed into my strength session. So if there's some type of skill that you're trying to learn, then you do it, place it right after your warm up. And then you go into then you would do power type exercises. Yeah, I'm not getting into that. That's a little bit more advanced. These individuals here are not necessarily candidates for that quite yet. So you would do strength and then you would do endurance after strength. If you were doing power, then you could throw in power. Now, I shouldn't say that the power clean is an exercise that both of these groups could start on pretty much right away. After a couple weeks, we should say. In Starting Strength, Mark Ripeto's book, he has, I think, at least 2 to 3 weeks of deadlifting before introducing the power clean. So there would be a little bit of time here before the power clean got introduced, but at some point the power clean would get introduced. Though for Mark Ripeto, he doesn't have it as a primary exercises. He basically has it's a core exercise, but the squat is more important to him. So he puts the power clean after the squat. He puts it after, he actually has it as like your last exercise. But if power is a primary thing that you want to work on and you're improving it, you want to improve it, you want to be fresh for it, you would do it before you got to the other lifts. So like when a weightlifter goes in and like their day is a snatch day, they would do their snatches first, then they might do some snatch assistance exercises, and then they would do a squat or a deadlift or something like that afterwards. So that's kind of the progression. Remember that like the lifts you want to do first after your warm up and your skill movement are the ones that are the sort of core focus of your training program right now. So like if you're trying to raise your deadlift, you might want to do your deadlift first. The only exception to that, or not the only exception, but one exception to that is if you are you want to compete in a powerlifting match, you would want to put the squat, you'd want to train the squat before you did the deadlift. But if you're just doing deadlifting and something else, and it's not for anything in particular, and the deadlift is the exercise you want to work on, then make that the first exercise you do after your warm up on the day that you're deadlifting, so that all of your energy can go into that, all of your fresh energy can go into that lift. So I think, again, a lot of information there for you all. Just kind of looking at my notes here a little bit on that. I did want to have this be a little bit more spread out for you over the last couple of days. But, my apologies on that because of my own, as my wife likes to say, and a guy I used to work with might as well be smoking dope, right? Running out of gas, right? That's kind of that's just bad form, right? So anyways, it totally hijacked my week. And so this got compressed. I'll think about this over the weekend and see if it makes sense to talk about this a little bit more next week. So we didn't really get to Friday Kaizen. It just is Friday Kaizen. I just like the sound of that, and just reminding you that little bits of improvement done regularly over time lead to big changes. So just keep that in mind with your fitness, with your health, with relationships, with career. I don't know if you are familiar with, oh my God, now I'm going to forget his name. This thing's sitting right over here. Oh my God. This thing's called Lead the Field. Earl Nightingale, right? Earl Nightingale, Lead the Field. And I listen to him sometimes when I'm working out. And at the end of that, he says, you want to work as if you will live forever and live as if you will die tomorrow. The point being that with the work, just do what you can do today and then show up again and do what you can do that day. And you just keep doing that. Don't try to pile everything in on top of yourself all at once. The same thing goes with your health and your fitness. There are maybe a few people who can just take everything they're doing right now, throw it out and start new. For the majority of us, it's little changes over time that will stick. And again, Strong for Life, we're all about saying we're going for the long, this is for the long term, right? You're thinking decades here, doing this for decades. You don't need to transform yourself overnight. It's going to take time. And if you let it take time, it'll last longer. It took a long time to get to whatever condition you're in now. If you have not been training, it's taken a long time to get there. So it's going to take a long time to get to where you want to go. And I think in general, one of my beefs with the sort of fitness industry is that I think they ultimately overpromise and underdeliver. They're like, you can do this immediately. And then when it doesn't happen, people get disappointed and disillusioned about that. I think it just makes more sense to say, look, yay, I congratulate you and I honor you for making the decision that you want to get fit. And I want you to know that, obviously it's going to take hard work. Nobody can do this for you. And the changes you will notice changes immediately, but it's going to take time to change your body. It's going to get time to change your habits. It's just going to take time to do it. You just have to stick with it. You're going to feel some improvement. You might feel some loss of improvement, but if you keep at it, it'll grow over time. And the changes in 5 years will be significant. So that's the mindset that is so important. And I think when you have a plan for what you're wanting to do and you lay that plan out, and if the plan makes sense and you're able to follow it, then you will achieve what you're trying to achieve. It's when we try to do this stuff quickly and overnight will we get injured and then we can't do it. We burn ourselves out and then we don't do it. We run into issues with family, work, whatever it is. Life just gets in the way and sidetracks you. And then you have a hard time getting back into it. If you go slow and steady, this fitness for sure is where the turtle, not the hare, the hare loses out here. It's where the turtle triumphs, because they're just every day they're going in and they're just doing a little bit. And then they're going back the next day and they're doing a little bit instead of blasting through it, making themselves super sore, and then having to take a week off and come back and just feeling miserable the whole time. Whereas the turtle is just doing a little bit at a time. They feel good every day and they just make that slow, steady progress. Fitness is a turtle thing. So just keep that in mind. Thanks for being here. Thanks, replays viewers, for being here. This one was a longer one. Hope you found some value in it. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And we'll see you on Tuesday, all right? And fingers crossed that I don't get hijacked again. My week doesn't get hijacked again by some silly thing like running out of gas. All right. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.